Hello and welcome to the Raptors Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. I'm your host, Will Lou. Reminder, we are streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and also airing live on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. To people watching, hello. I'm joined in the first segment by Vivek Jacob, Big V of Raptors.com. Vivek, how you doing?
I'm good. The lineup is out for Manchester United versus Atletico Madrid. No, I'm joking, man. It was nice to get a bit of a break this weekend, enjoy the All-Star festivities, and now we can talk about the Raptors leading up to Friday.
Yeah, definitely. And actually, before we get going here, I just want to say thank you to Alex for holding it down for 2 shows. Speaking with Faisal, speaking with Amy, was definitely listening while I was away skiing. And now I'm back. Alex has to do his customary 2 days off in the week. So everything worked out. Vivek. All right, so let's talk about the first half of the season because really that's all we got to talk about. I really don't like calling the first half because obviously there's been 50-plus games that have been played already. But having said that, though, the All-Star break is a good time right now to sort of reevaluate what's gone on in the first bit of the year. And I thought we'd kind of break it down and each of us come up with 3 of the most promising trends on the Raptors season so far and 3 of the most negative trends or the most concerning trends of the first half so far. So, Vivek, let's start positive. What's your first promising trend from the Raptors season to date?
So the first one for me is Scottie's offensive ceiling. I think obviously he came in with a lot of defensive hype and what he could contribute to the Raptors on that end with his length, with his size, with his switchability. Frankly, that's probably been a bit behind what he's done offensively. And some people called him a 0-level scorer coming into the league, and I think he's proven that he's definitely not that. So I think that's a really positive trend when you think about not only the ceiling of Scottie Barnes, but the Raptors as a whole as well.
Yeah, definitely. And look, we will get into more depth on Scottie Barnes with what I would charitably say is the number one Scottie Barnes expert in basketball. Coach David Thorpe, who obviously has spoken a lot about Scottie and was very right about Scottie even before the draft. I agree with you, man. I think this really pairs well with what I have, which is just sort of the entire rookie class this season has been one of the most positive things for me for the Raptors because I think, look, because the Raptors are winning, because the Raptors are, in contention for a playoff spot right now, holding a playoff spot right now, maybe the developmental priorities have changed just a little bit. When you really take a step back and you think about what Scottie in particular, but also Delano Banton and Justin Champagnie, and maybe David Johnson, if he can kind of catch on here late in the season, although it sort of hasn't happened for him just yet. But those 3 guys in particular are all really promising to me in terms of I'm very happy with having them in the rotation next season, right? And some of those guys, Nick is already happy with them in the rotation. That's very rare for rookies. And when you look at sort of the Raptors rebuilding and trying to restock the farm here, I think that these guys are guys that right now, the commonality for all 3 is shooting, right? Scottie's biggest weakness is shooting. Delano's biggest weakness is shooting. Justin's weakness is shooting. But these guys are showing improvements on that area. But the other thing is that, they all fit this style of basketball that the Raptors want to play, right? And when you look at a rookie class, actually, and I know you and I have done this, and we kind of went back and looked through all the rookie classes, but there's really something very promising about this. And, it's rare when you can get 3 guys that you could feel pretty confident in their future. Obviously, one of those guys being Scottie, who we all know that has star-level potential. I guess I'll just ask you here, though, because I will ask Coach Thorpe as well, but are you a little bit concerned with sort of Scottie's play tailing off a little bit?
Not really. I wouldn't say concerned. I would just say that he's figuring it out because obviously, I think we all have that game in Boston early on where he shows his
game 2
full
of the season
package and full repertoire.
Yeah.
And, that's a situation where OG struggled out of the gate. Pascal Siakam isn't there. And by default, the team has to go to him. And so I think now he's just in a role where he knows Pascal is number 1. Then you've got Fred. Then you've got Gary doing what he's been doing. OG Anunoby has obviously had his struggles over the last 10 games, but he's been pretty solid on the season. And so I think he's someone that is fine with just, working around the edges and giving the team what it needs when they, like, when you see Pascal go to the bench, you do see him take on a more assertive role. And so I think it has more to do with that than anything. So it doesn't concern me in terms of, repeatability in his moves or, sustainability. So that's why I would say I'm not concerned. By the way, as we're doing these positive and negative trends for the listeners, we are not including Pascal and Fred in this because they would be all over it.
Oh,
so
yeah,
I think
it's too
just
obvious.
for clarity's sake, those are the easy ones. So we left them out of this.
Yeah, I mean, that's a little too obvious. That goes without saying, really. Pascal playing at an All-NBA level, especially over the last 2 months, and then Fred making the All-Star team and being second in the NBA in three-point makes behind Steph is, those are the most obvious ones. But let's go to the first of our concerning trends. And I'll start with mine here before we get to yours. One of my concerning trends in the first half is sort of like, I feel like OG Anunoby is hitting a bit of a wall, maybe in terms of, or maybe even hitting a bit of a ceiling in terms of his development. I think coming into the year, there was, out of the hype for everybody, right? There was hype for Scotty because there's just an excitement for the number 4 overall pick. I think he's exceeded that hype, right? Especially from the get-go, he was like really exciting. I think there was hype about Fred stepping into that leadership role, and he's done that, right? But I think more than anyone else, the guy that got the most hype was OG Anunoby. He was a very popular pick for most improved player across the board. And when I look at the season right now, I know he obviously had the hip pointer injury, which knocked him out for about a month, but it hasn't really he hasn't really taken that jump that a lot of people kind of expected him to, right? When you look at, his usage has increased this year, especially at the start of the season, right? But his usage has increased. This is the first time in his career his usage has been over 20%, and usage is just sort of like how many possessions are you using in terms of shots, in terms of free throws, in terms of turnovers and things like that. He's never been more than 20%. Last season was the closest at 19%, and he was good last year, very good last year, and now it's up to 21%. But it's starting to drop here a little bit, and I just think that, like, if you look at his efficiency metrics, right, last season he shot 48% from the field. This year he's at 43.6%. He was shot 40% from the 3 last year. This year he's at 35%. And maybe it's just like a bit of a 3-point shooting blip. Obviously there's some variance there, but it just doesn't feel like OG is like as clear cut as that third guy as maybe people expected him to be coming into the year. If anything, actually, I think almost Gary has sort of jumped into that third option type of role, which makes sense. I think Gary is a very, very polished offensive player, probably more polished than OG, but maybe OG has hit a bit of a ceiling, or at least a little bit of a break in his development. Maybe that's what I wanted to ask you is, do you feel like he's sort of hitting a ceiling, or do you feel like he's sort of just like the circumstances of the season, sort of the injuries and things like that, this is just more of a blip and that he will continue to rise in his career?
I would say, the ceiling I envisioned for him before the season began is different than the ceiling I view for him now. But I will say the development is tracking the right way. And so we are seeing struggles, but I think we need to see these struggles. We need to see those reps where, he's taking those threes off the dribble, where he's in the mid-range and he's trying to, create a shot for himself. Those are important aspects for him to develop. And so this might be a season where he's figuring it out. And so we should see him be a better player next season, but you don't become that player without getting those reps. And so from a development standpoint, I'm happy with where things are at. The one thing I do look at with OG is, he had a huge opportunity coming into this season where without Pascal Siakam, he could have taken over the reins. He had that big game in New York. We remember that one. But I think by and large, he's been fine with being the fourth option. I think you're right to say that Gary has emerged into that third option. And I think, if he was a bit more assertive at certain points in the season, once you take that spot, it's yours to lose. Like, look at Fred VanVleet over the years, right? He at a certain point, he could have just been like, okay, yeah, this is a nice role. I'm a sixth man. I'm doing this. It's fine. I'm playing off Kyle Lowry. I can do catch and shoots. This is it. That's fine. But he's come for more and more and more. And now this is his role on the team as an all-star, right? And so at a certain point, OG Anunoby has got to reach that phase where it's like, no, this is the player I want to be. Everyone get out the way.
Right, right. And, I think in particular what you mentioned in terms of like, him trying to do the harder things, I think that might be more of the blip that we're seeing rather than necessarily like he's just sort of fallen off a little bit as a player. Because I don't think that's the case whatsoever. Like, I think if you put OG in that 3-and-D role, he can thrive. He will give you 15 points on 60% true shooting. He will have lockdown defense pretty much across the board, no matter what position he's guarding. Like, all that is still there for him. But I think he has that ambition to, like, get to another level beyond that, right? And I think that's where it's going to be hard. And the biggest thing for me is actually just looking at his numbers. Last season, he took 1.6 pull-up jumpers per game. This is from 2 or 3, right? He shot it at a 32% effective field goal, which is not good. Let's be real. It's not good.
Yeah.
This season, he's clearly trying to do more of that. He's gone from 1.6 pull-up jumpers per game to 4.1 pull-up jumpers per game. That's a 3 times increase. And when you look at it, his effective field goal percentage is still 35%. That's where, to me, I'm like, he either masters that or he doesn't. And really, that's sort of the make or break aspect to his game. Right, because if he wants to take that next level to be that kind of like star level wing who can create, who can get his own shot, and we see him do it all the time. Like, he actually does hit a decent share of like step back jumpers. There's that one against DeMar in overtime. You'll see that little buzzer beater, the one where he crossed up the Plumlee, Mason Plumlee, I think, and step back and against Charlotte. Like, he can make that move. It's just he hasn't mastered it yet, although he is trying to do more of it. And I guess he'll either continue to master it or he won't. And I guess that's sort of the make or break point in his career. But let's move on to the next positive or the next negative. What do you have in terms of one of their more concerning trends of the first half?
So I think at this point you would look at the 2020 draft and say that's an L. I think when it's Malachi Flynn and it's Jalen Harris. Obviously, Jalen Harris is not playing in the NBA this season due to suspension. Malachi Flynn doesn't seem to fit into the Raptors' plans right now because they are predicated on length and switchability, and he doesn't really present that. And so it's very clear to me at this point that this vision that the Raptors had did not exist in 2020, and it's something that has formulated after, or else I think they draft in 2020 quite differently, right? And so I think that's something you have to look back on and say, okay, the plan then does not match the plan now, and therefore the picks that you made don't really fit into the plan possibly going forward.
Yeah, it's rare to see the Raptors kind of go sort of through a whole draft cycle and not come through with somebody. And I say draft cycle because Raptors obviously also get undrafted guys regularly as well, right? But yeah, that one is tough. But then again, it turns out if you draft 29th and 59th, sometimes you might not come up with a great player out of that. And maybe Malachi still has more of that room to grow. But as you mentioned, the style has sort of shifted against him. So not only has he sort of struggled to sort of find his footing, but also the Raptors are kind of moving in a style that doesn't really favor him as much.
It hurts.
Yeah,
it hurts just a little bit more knowing that Malachi went 29th and Desmond Bane went 30th, who would look great in a Raptors uniform right now.
Yeah, fair enough. The Raptors would actually have a fair bit of shooting if they did have Desmond. But, then again, you also have Precious on the team. Maybe he won't pass the Desmond, Anyway, let's go to our second most promising trends of the first half. For me, the second most promising trend is Gary's scoring. Let's be real here. This guy had 6 straight games of 30-plus points in scoring. If you look at just like the thing is, he's really been impressive in the consistency of his scoring. For a guy who shoots a lot of jumpers, and we know that kind of comes up and down, he's a very consistent scorer because the games that he's sort of down almost always coincide with the fact that he's coming back from injury or an absence or something like that, right?
Right.
Like he has this trend where he comes off of injury, he's like, not really in a rhythm for like 2 or 3 games. But then after that, he's just been consistently giving teams buckets. He is an incredible 3-point shooter. We see the ability to generate his own threes is really impressive because he's able to either, coming off a screen or just like one-on-one step back scenarios. He has that on lock. He has the mid-range game too. But I think Gary has exceeded all expectations. And as we mentioned earlier, I think he has jumped into that third scorer role, and he has been really, really good in that role. And I think we knew that this was a possibility, but this is like an upper end of that possibility coming into this season. He's been just a success across the board, really. There's nothing really bad to say about anything Gary's done all season.
Yeah, I really enjoyed watching him play this season on the offensive end because of how well he's fit in, right? And I think one of the things Nick Nurse talked about before the season was, hey, can he fit into the offense a bit better and not, sort of do his own thing, and then the Raptors offense exists outside of that. And I think the only times he's actually gone to that is when the team has needed it, so where they're in a lull and they haven't scored for 3-4 possessions down the floor, and it's like, hey, Gary, we need you to get us something. And I think he's been really good in recognizing those moments. And then outside of that, he's functioning off catch and shoots provided by Fred, provided by Pascal, and that's exactly what you want to see. So offensively, I think it's been a huge bonus. And the big thing is now is like you're adding one more person that has to be taken seriously in the scouting report.
Very seriously.
It can't just be Pascal and Fred that other teams have to worry about. And I even asked, Nuggets coach Michael Malone after that game against Denver, and he said, "Yeah, we know Gary because he was in our division." And we was in those battles between the Portland Trail Blazers and the Denver Nuggets.
That's right. Yeah.
And so he said, we know what Gary's capable of. We game plan for him as well. We know he's an important person to game plan for. And I think that's another thing that's going to be interesting to see how it plays out as more teams come to really, really respect him.
Yeah, for sure. And that's where maybe the assists can come up a little bit because obviously that's the one area of his game where he's not playmaking as much for others. Although really right now, the only role for Gary is to just put the ball in the basket. Last 13 games for Gary Trent Jr., averaging 25 points per game. So pretty good. I'm looking forward to seeing what he does on the second half of the All-Star break. All right, Vivek, what's your second most promising trend of the first half?
Chris Boucher becoming an impact player.
Yep.
I think for the large part of his career, he's been looked at as someone who can provide some scoring, provide an exciting highlight with a block, but doesn't necessarily impact the game, impact winning. And this season, to go from where he was that first month and a half and turn around his season and really make winning plays is a huge development. And I've got nothing but respect for the way he's turned it around, and he's made himself an important part of this rotation.
Absolutely. And I think that's where, if you look at the fact that his shot attempts have come down, he's not scoring as much, but I think he's getting even more praise from the coaching staff, from his teammates. Like, he's really just doing all the right things. He's taking charges. Like, I was looking at this, so like, the Raptors, for example, just as a team, don't really take charges. I don't know if this is like a philosophy or something, but they just don't take charges, right? Obviously, last season, they were great at charges. The years before that, because of Kyle, they were great at charges. Just as a team, though, they don't take a lot of charges. But Chris Boucher leads the team with 8 charges. And the next closest guy is like 2. I think Precious and some other guys is at 2 right now for the Raptors. So I think you're seeing Chris sort of make those kind of plays where he's beating the defense, and he's taking all the right. He goes like entire weeks now where you can only say like, there's like maybe 1 or 2 ill-advised shots in a whole week. That used to be like a whole quarter, right? Yeah. So he's really found his role. It's been great. His on-off metrics have always been really strong. I think even this season where, he hasn't necessarily like dominated from start to finish. It doesn't really feel like he dominates games. But I mean, the Raptors are plus 2.6 points per 100 possessions better offensively with Chris on the floor. And defensively, they're 5.3 points per 100 possessions better defensively with him on the floor as well. So he's just been one of the Raptors' biggest impact players as well in terms of the impact metrics. All right, let's get to the second most concerning trends. For me, one of the concerning trends is maybe just the front office not valuing shooting. Outside of signing Svi, which like happened later in the offseason after that first initial rush, and then they kind of signed into a 2-year, league minimum deal. That's not necessarily an impact signing by any means, and it hasn't been for the Raptors this season. And then also acquiring Goran Dragic, but then essentially cutting him on the rotation like a week in, and then obviously he's left the team and joined Brooklyn. Like, they haven't added shooters all the guys that
Hmm.
they're adding, I mean, obviously Gary, but like they took Norm for Gary, so that's like keeping the shooting the same, although I think Gary is a better shooter than Norm. But still, like they're just not adding shooters, and I think it's really just like the team firmly believes that they can teach guys to shoot.
Yeah.
But in the meantime, though, you get a situation where the Raptors just, I mean, they have shooters, and those shooters are exceptional in terms of Gary and Fred. But outside of that, like that's where the team really struggles with that three. And yeah, it's not a surprise to me that the Raptors struggle in the half court. Like, yeah, you can need some 3-point shooting.
Yeah, I think that's probably the biggest concern with this team going into not just this postseason, but how you look to address the needs going forward. And if you have that inadequate level of shooting, you are forced to be very creative about your offense, right? You have to really attack the offensive glass and get those extra possessions. You have to create turnovers, and I think that creates a problem in and of itself, because this will lead into one of my negatives, which was that there's no real margin for error, right?
Mm,
And so
okay.
I think when you have a situation where you have Pascal, Fred, pretty much the entire starting lineup playing all these minutes, it's because you have to take advantage of what those talents present. And as opposed to, when you look at, for example, the Miami Heat, the Atlanta Hawks, and they have shooting throughout their roster, you can have that margin for error because you can count on different guys to make shots.
Right.
Like for me, with the 3-point shot, I've always looked at it is it's always a variance shot, right? You're going to go through hot streaks, you're going to go through lulls, but if you have some shooting depth across your roster, ideally, when some guys are going through a funk, other guys will be hot, and that can help balance it out in terms of being consistent over the course of the season. When Gary, OG, or Fred, when they go cold, that's it. There's nowhere else to look.
Yeah.
And that's the problem that the Raptors have.
Yeah. Hopefully they can teach these guys to shoot, though, because I've literally watched Nick Nurse in the practice facility walk over to a player and hand him a Nick Nurse pill, which is yeah. Anyway, so lastly here, we got like 2 minutes. For me, my last positive is just Precious Achiuwa's defense overall. I continue to be super impressed with his ability as a big man to keep guys in front, force people to shoot over length. Obviously, he has a bit of shot blocking as well because he's so athletic. Um, but the quick feet and the ability to keep guys in front, even on switches against guards, he does a great job of that. He's a great rebounder as well, especially for his size. I think I've been really happy with Precious. I think the more I think about it, I'm like, look, some of the mistakes are glaring, but they're fixable. But he has a real defensive talent. And I think that he fits the Raptors' identity. And I think when you look at the impact metrics of who's been one of the Raptors' best defenders this season, this team's filled with strong individual defenders. I think Precious is one of the Raptors' 5 best defenders. All right, what's your last positive?
My last positive is the fact that the timeline has been accelerated. When you look at Pascal Siakam becoming an even better player than he was in 2019-20, you look at Fred VanVleet at an all-star level. The biggest thing of all, when you look at Scottie Barnes playing at the level he already is at, that changes the timeline. I think before the season, people would have looked at the roster and said, Scottie Barnes at 20 years old, you've got Fred VanVleet and Pascal Siakam at 27, 28. Which way do you lead in terms of building the roster? But with Scottie being this ready, it allows you to build around both.
Yeah, no, that's true. That's great. We're seeing it right now. They literally made a win now trade by getting Thad, which is a real vote of confidence for this group. All right, lastly, for me, my most concerning trend, my third most concerning trend is just Kem having a really down year, kind of just having almost becoming a redundant in a way, just because the Raptors have multiple options. They're starting Scottie at center. They got Precious. They got Chris Boucher. They got Thad now. Like, I don't know where he fully fits, but I guess this isn't as big of a problem because, I think the Raptors do actually have other options here. What's your last concerning trend to wrap up the half here?
Yuta Watanabe. I think there was a lot of optimism for him coming into this season, and it just hasn't worked out, whether it's been the injuries and missing time with COVID and just not being able to catch a rhythm. I think it's been a really tough season for him. When you look at, the Raptors having limited shooting options, I think he was someone you looked at and said, hey, he provides You know he has the length. You know he has the switchability. You know what he can do defensively. If he can just knock down that 3-point shot when he's open, it is going to provide that little bit of breathing room at those wing positions, and that's something that unfortunately he has not been able to provide.
You're right, man. You're right. And I've defended Yuta quite a bit, but because he didn't have ramen with me, um, this is where we're at as a society. All right.
I don't have his number.
I tried.
Oh man.
Yeah. I'm still
I'll have
optimistic
ramen
about
with you,
Yuta.
Will. It's okay.
You know what, Vivek? You know what? Let's go. You and me, let's go get ramen. And we'll talk about soccer then because we've run out of time here.
Yeah.
V, appreciate you coming on as always. Follow Vivek on Twitter at Vivek M. Jacob. And that's a good spot for us to take a break. I'm your host, Walu. You've been listening to The Raptors Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590, The Fan. Welcome back to the Raptors Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590, The Fan. I'm your host, Ralu. I am joined in the second segment by True Hoops, David Thorpe. We're going to get him on the line in just a second. Of course, as I mentioned in the first half of the show, always got to ask Coach Thorpe about Scottie Barnes because obviously, you know, he was in so early on Scottie, especially, and also right in so many ways about Scottie. But honestly, like, I'm a big fan of Coach Thorpe because of the fact that I listen to the True Hoop podcast like all the time. He does great work with Henry Abbott and Gerard Hector. And yeah, I mean, like, I just loved hearing his perspective on all things basketball. And I definitely wanted to get his thoughts on guys like Precious Achiuwa as well. Just wanted to ask him about sort of where the game of basketball is going in particular, especially with the Raptors being at one of the forefronts of that, with the fact that they have all these 6'9" athletes. And, you know, I think just it's always a good thing to do is to pick Coach Thorpe's brain. And we're going to bring him on here. Coach, how you doing?
I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Thank you for making time as always. Look, you know, this is a Toronto radio station, so we're always going to have to ask you about Scottie Barnes. And I know you, you know, are a big admirer of Scottie's game. And I just wanted to ask you, actually, just what have you made of, like, the overall way the Raptors have developed Scottie this season? Because we've seen him guard all sorts of different positions. We've seen him play all sorts of different positions offensively as well. I saw a stat out there that he has been the second most versatile defender this season in terms of percentage of time spent guarding at different positions this season. So I just wanted to get your overall thoughts on sort of the approach the Raptors have taken with the development of Scottie in his rookie year.
I saw the same thing. I think Juan Toscano-Anderson was number one in diversity.
Yeah.
Defensively.
Yeah.
I'm not surprised. I've watched a lot of their games. He is guarding everybody. It's surprising that a rookie would be asked to do it. I happen to love what Toronto's doing with him because I think Coach Nurse is open. I really that's probably the best way to put it. He's open. He doesn't know what's the best way to use Scottie. How could he? And so playing him the way he's playing him is, I just feel like, the best way to collect as much data as possible. And this offseason, they can really kind of lock in. They know Siakam, they know Fred, they know OG. Now they don't know Scottie. And they may now. They might have been doing that all week this week, figuring out, okay, we've got tons of data here. Let's look at the data, look at the tape, and make some decisions. You know, maybe in the future they don't have him guard certain positions, or maybe not in certain parts of the game, or maybe just not particular players. But how do you know until you try? And that's one of Scottie's gifts, is he's good enough where you can try almost anything and get away with it. That is not the case for lots of players. So offensively too, I think that they've encouraged him to attack and be aggressive, be assertive, and do it from different positions on the court and different positions on, you know, in the depth chart, so to speak. In terms of who's playing next to him. And I always say that your regular season and postseason play really provides you a reference points to build out your off-season curriculum. That's what I do as a coach. Here's what you did well. Here's what you didn't do so well. Here's what you were terrible at. And here's what you were average at. Now let's go into this summer with a plan based on those reference points. And if they're not just data points, they're not just statistics and percentages, but they're also reference points in a player's mind. Ooh, I remember I brought the ball down on a rebound and I got stripped by Chris Paul. Or I remember I attacked the lane and just didn't have a way to score over Embiid. These are reference points that players can use to build out their plan and be more successful in their summer development.
That's a great point that you're making, because I do think that obviously with the newer player, with a guy who even in college, like Scottie played and was using it a variety of different ways, right? You definitely want to get as much data in terms of what he can do. And I think that is interesting. So based on what you've seen so far, and I know you watch a lot of the Raptors, I've read a lot of your work, and, you know, you wrote about Pascal, you read about Scottie quite a bit, and just the team overall. But what do you think is the most, if we're talking about, like, let's say, because the Raptors, right, they're probably going to make the playoffs if they stay healthy. Where would you say Scottie's most effective role right now if we're talking about trying to win a playoff series?
Oh, I think they probably will tone down his scoring. I think they'll try to make him more opportunistic in the postseason and ask him to do less without the great matchup. I don't think it's a problem for him now. I don't think he tends to get himself in trouble. But if you want to maximize every possession in the postseason, which I think is a fair ask, then you should probably let Freddie, Siakam, and then probably OG third. The whole idea is to try to get a second person to guard the ball, to draw the crowd. Then you play away from the crowd. I think Steve Kerr calls it getting the first domino to drop. Let those three guys get the first domino to drop, and let Scotty play off them. I think that, unless he's got a favorable matchup, there's a switch. I think you've seen him playing bully ball more than we ever saw at Florida State, which I wanted him to do that at Florida State, and I expected him to do it in the NBA. I don't know that I thought he would do it this year, and he's doing it this year. So you get the right matchup. If a team feels like we don't have to guard Scotty, well, you got to let Scotty make him pay for that. But don't try it. Like, he has one play this year. He scored it, but he attacked Jokic from the perimeter. Hard right-to-left drive. Amazing left-hand reverse finish. I don't know that he needs to be trying that against Joel Embiid in the first round of the playoffs. Probably better off, just letting him make easier plays. He's done enough this year where he knows what to work on in the offseason already.
Right, for sure. And I think maybe this kind of helps contextualize sort of a little bit of the slowdown that we've seen in Scotty's numbers. I mean, look, I don't fully care about sort of what his scoring is month to month, but I think about his role right now. He's in the starting lineup. He's playing a lot of center in that starting lineup, which is interesting because we've seen him also guard point guards and even just wings at the top of the floor quite a bit early in the season. But right now he's primarily playing center defensively. It's kind of a fifth option in the starting lineup. I think the Raptors obviously have guys who, Gary is averaging 18 this year. He's been scoring a lot of late. And then your core three, obviously, with OG, Pascal, and Fred. So Scotty, naturally is the fifth most talented offensive player in that group right now. But I think this kind of contextualizes sort of where he is this season. But I don't think, obviously, that's something that he will stay with going forward. I also wanted to ask you about Scotty's shot at all. I mean, I'm not sure how closely, you're watching every single shot from Scotty or anything like that. But have you noticed at all, because you did watch every single game at Florida State that he played last season, have you noticed any change in his shot at all?
From last year or during the season this year?
I would say from last year, but if you notice any changes within the season too, I'd definitely love to hear your thoughts.
Well, he definitely looks a lot better than he did last year. I think it's off his – my best read is that it's not on his palm as much as it was last year. I think he trusts his stroke more. Last year he kind of knew what it was supposed to look like, but holding his hand at the end of the shot, hand to the rim kind of thing. We call it shoot and freeze. He knew to do that, but I don't think from A to Z he really did it mechanically the same, nearly as much as he is this year. And so yeah, it's definitely improved. His free throw has too, and I think that'll I don't know if he'll ever be a great shooter. He might be. I certainly wouldn't say he can't be. It's all going to be, I think, just slow improvements from here. But I'll tell you one thing regarding this slowdown. Of course, Gary is another option, and it's a very good one. Someone has to do worse. Not everyone's going to continue to play better all year. I wrote this not too long ago. In fact, I wrote it last week, where I think they should be getting rid of the rookie Rising Stars game.
Yep.
Man, these guys have to be exhausted. I know from talking to players myself that they are. These guys finished their season. They went through last year. They went through the pre-draft stuff. The stress of that, the interview process, the work you put in, then summer league. It's not a rookie wall. It's just a wall. Everyone hits it. The veterans I talked to are exhausted too. The rookies have never done it before, but they've also been going longer with more stress in the off season than what a veteran would have necessarily, because they're not getting drafted anymore. And I think that has taken a toll. Last year was such a strange year because of the COVID too for these guys. But there's nothing that makes me think he's not trending exactly where I thought he'd be to begin with, which is an MVP All-Star level player.
Yeah. No, seriously, you watch Scotty, sometimes you forget he's a rookie because he can do a lot of those things, right? Like taking Jokic off the dribble is not easy. I mean, you just ask OG, for example. In that same game, he tried to go up at the rim against Jokic at the end, and Jokic blocked him. He actually, has been really solid defensively this season, really good even. So I also wanted to ask you about just the transition for some of the younger guys. I think with Scotty, maybe he had a leg up on this because it wasn't like at FSU. Like, it wasn't like he was the clear cut number one option, has the ball every single time down, controlling the ball all the time. But it feels like for a lot of young guys, that transition is like learning how to play away from the ball, learning how to set screens, the right times to roll, catching and shooting for three, playing defense at different positions. I think that's where the Raptors have asked the most out of Scotty this year, is the fact that they've tried him a little bit with everything. And he has to sort of learn some of these skills, which I think for a lot of fans who, especially, and I know last time you came on, you basically said, forget rookie of the year, you have Scotty Barnes, just like focus on what's really important. But I think for some fans who are like really fixated on, oh my God, if Scotty's numbers are coming down, he's not going to win rookie of the year. I feel like the Raptors are getting him to learn some of these other skills that, regardless of what he ultimately becomes in his career, he's going to need these other skills, learning how to play off the ball, learning how to play without the ball, and being effective in that front. Is that what you're seeing too, in terms of like, if in terms of, yes, he is the fifth option with this group right now, but these are skills that he's going to have to learn eventually anyway?
If you want to win games, they are. He is an excellent screen setter. Not just for a rookie, for anyone. He doesn't. You can look it up. He doesn't set many illegal screens. He holds it. That's the teaching point. You got to kind of hold your screen, get a wide base. He doesn't always get the wide lower body, but he does, I think, hold it pretty well. When to cut, when to try something, when not to try something. These are all things that, I wrote the book Basketball with Chaz. You are connected to other people. It's not a solo game here. It's not 5 games of one-on-one like it was in the 80s and 70s to some degree with the illegal defensive rules. This is one game of 5-on-5, and you better learn how to play with the other people. Giannis, as a rookie, I don't think was as good as Scotty. Giannis had some gifts that Scotty will never have. As athletic as Scotty is, and he is a hell of an athlete, showed that in the Chicago pre-draft. We've seen in some of the plays he's done this year. Giannis is a better athlete and is taller and longer. But there's some feel things that Scotty has that I don't think Giannis has. So, because I do think there's a comparison there. I also think he's got a lot of Kawhi Leonard in him. But Rookie of the Year is an individual award, and this is a team sport. When I'm evaluating players, it's all in the context of, well, who can help his teams win the most? I wrote this the other day. In 10 years, I think Mobley and Barnes will have the most wins of any player in this class. Now, you can say that it's because of where they went, although in Mobley's case, good luck with that, in Cleveland, but I think it's a lot of who they are. And so Toronto fans can get stressed about the Rookie of the Year if they want to. Mobley's deserving. He's one of the best defensive rookies we've ever seen.
Yeah.
He's to me, he's got to have won the award already. But I think what matters most is winning, and Toronto has a real shot. I would say a good chance, better than average chance of making the playoffs. After that, who knows what will happen? The conference is so strong this year. But, they should just be thrilled with what they got.
Yeah, for sure. And I wanted to move off Scotty a little bit and ask you about Precious Achiuwa as well, because I think for me, thinking about Precious, his mistakes are like the most obvious things. He'll not make the extra pass sometimes, or like sometimes, he'll fumble the ball. He does seem to like struggle with having a plan in terms of how to finish at the basket, but I think defensively, he's shown a lot of great tools that really fits what the Raptors want to do. I think he's been one of the 5 best defenders on the team already, just based on what he can do as a big man with his feet and keeping guys in front. What do you make of Precious Achiuwa right now as a prospect in his second season?
I agree with what you said. When I first started helping Udonis Haslem, who was my first ever NBA client, so this was back in 2003, he was trying out for Summer League for the Heat and the Spurs that summer. One of my goals was to get him to really buy into the idea of be a defensive player and a rebounder now. Let's make a team. And then once you're on a team, if you can get playing time because you're defensive rebounding, we can go to work on your offense. Now, Udonis was amazing around the rim finisher in college. I think he made one jump shot in 4 years in Florida, and we were going to have to change that because he's only 6'7", and the league is so huge. But that's exactly how it played out. He defended, he rebounded, he was tough, he understood the game. Obviously, you're talking about the highest level basketball IQ in the history of the planet almost. Udonis is like brilliant. There's a reason why he's still They're paying him. He's the most expensive assistant, probably highest-paid assistant coach in league history, and deservedly. He's just that kind of brain. His high school coach is a head coach for South Carolina. Has been to the Final Four. It doesn't happen frequently. And then he played for Billy Donovan for 4 years. He's, I think, proven to be one of the best coaches in the world at two different levels. Mm-hmm. So Precious doesn't have that. He doesn't have. Played for Eric for a little bit in Miami, but he started the game late. He's an excellent defender and doesn't really know what he's doing on offense, which doesn't make him unique. I would say a good percentage of the league's young players don't have a plan. That's kind of what I do with guys is I give them a plan. Agents will call me about one of their players, and they'll say, he's just out there. This is a quote. They'll say, he's just out there hooping. He needs someone to give him a plan because not every coach in the NBA, I think, does a good job of that, especially with guys that are not, fully in the rotation or not one of the best 3 or 4 scorers. So this is what we do. And I agree with you. I don't think he has a plan. I think he's got a lot to learn on offense, but anchor that'll keep him in the league is the defense. Mm. And for the very least, it's nice for Coach Nurse to have that and roster flexibility of knowing, I could play Scotty and go small with at the 5 and because we don't have any matchup to guys like Embiid and Jokic. Let's make them match up to our uniqueness. But he also is someone, even though he's a little undersized, that can defend that position and help and so forth. And this is the foundation for him. There's nothing wrong. Trae Young's foundation is offense. Precious to a lesser degree, but not that much less, would be defense.
Mm. All right. I really I think that really meshes well with like what the Raptors are trying to acquire here too, in terms of like, you look at the lineup, the rotation now. I mean, after adding Thaddeus Young, it's like 7 out of their top 9 guys are 6'9" athletes with 7-foot wingspans. And I think obviously this is a clear strategy by the front office. When you look at the acquisitions that they made in the draft last year, in the trade deadline this year, like this is the team that they want to build. And I wanted to get your thoughts on just sort of like that strategy of basketball and sort of like that direction in which Masai and the front office, they want to move towards. Like, I think to me right now, it's just, if they had the shooting down, I think this would be something that would work and kind of be unquestioned. Really, the only thing for me right now is just some of the guys, especially when you look up and down the roster coming off the bench, they don't have a lot of shooting. That's going to hurt them offensively. And I guess occasionally you're going to run into like Jokic and Embiid, and they're going to give you trouble. But then again, you can have a 7-footer out there, and they'll probably still give that 7-footer trouble. What do you make of the Raptors' positional experiments right now with the fact that they have all these 6'9" guys?
Well, I would suggest the way you frame the question is not quite accurate, and I think you know what I mean. It's not based on position. They're trying to get talented players on the court. Mm. And I think they're ignoring or eschewing the idea that there has to be some kind of position box that are checked. I think it's the only way to go. I don't really know what other teams are doing when they're not doing that. You've got to this if you're trying to win games, then you've got to, within the rules of the league, because you can't just add players, you've got to find a way to continue to enhance the talent base, fitting in the culture and all of that, and how players play on the court and how they go about their things off the court. And so you're just trying to get talent upgrades. And so in the case of, for example, Thaddeus Young, who was very good for Chicago last year, and then really didn't do anything this year, I think it's just a matter of thinking, well, he's better than anyone else we could have added. Mm. Even if we needed, quote unquote, a player at a different position, we would just rather add the talent. And you have a head coach who is pragmatic enough to kind of play with the riches of the richness and the texture of his roster and come up with a strategy that emphasizes or enhances that which he has. Especially, remember, you don't develop a strategy in a vacuum. You have to consider the opponent. So you guys don't know football as well up there, but you know it a little bit. You do play football up there.
Yeah.
It's great. Yeah, it's great if you want to create an offensive system that really accentuates a running game. But if the best two or three teams in your division are the best in the world at defending the run, you're in trouble. You probably need to have a plan B. Well, I think Toronto is trying to create as many plan Bs as they can based on that diversity of talent in the East. And I agree with you on the shooting. I've always said that I don't ever want to be a GM, but if I ever pursued it, I would look into creating a roster where at all times I could have 80% of the guys on the court elite athletes and 80% of them being elite shooters. I wouldn't worry so much about size. I'm not saying that would work, and I'm also not saying that I really would try to have you can't have 5 Fred VanVleets because he's not a great athlete, but I don't know that you could have 5 6'3" guys and be successful. I'd probably play with it a little bit and just try to shoot 63 a game and bring a bunch of athletes that could also race and dunk. But I'd probably have a roster that looks more like Toronto's. And then, of course, the shooting thing is the issue. So, three-point shooting also has a variance to it. So it very well may be that in the playoffs, Toronto shoots a lot of threes, defends with all those guys, which it won't be easy to score on. I mean, they could be a top 10 defense at that point. And if they can just get hot 3 games in 7, and then they win a 4th game, not because they shot great, but because the other team just shot terribly, which happens all the time.
Yep.
Some team goes 6 for 35. Those things happen. Well, now you've won a series that you weren't necessarily expected to win. So my guess is that's kind of their strategy is that they're going to throw some lineups out there all game long that they're just going to be challenging to score on. They're always going to be at risk to hurt you in transition with because everyone can kind of grab it and go. Boy, the way Fred and Pascal are playing alone makes them much more dynamic on offense than if it's just one of those 2 guys. And then throw in the way Gary's playing. I don't know that. I think the Celtics and the Raptors both are teams that are going to give top 4 seeds fits. And then just because I think if Marcus Smart comes back healthy because their defense, and then you throw in what Atlanta did last year, their offense can be a juggernaut. So that's why the East is going to be so interesting this year. Is you just got just really interesting teams that can cause a lot of damage to teams that ultimately have more talent and have a better record. But any of those 3 teams can really get it going by season's end and pull an upset or 2.
All right, Coach Thorpe, thank you so much for making time, as always. I can't recommend the True Hoop podcast enough and everything that you guys do in terms of the writing side as well. But, I enjoy, having you on and look forward to doing it again soon.
That'd be great. Thanks. Be safe up there.
All right, thank you. All right, that does it for us today. I'm your host, Willou. You've been listening to The Raptors Show, powered by DoorDash on Sportsnet 590 The Fan. Make sure you find The Raptors Show wherever you listen to podcasts and subscribe, and please rate and review our show. A reminder, we are streaming live on Sportsnet's YouTube channel and on Sportsnet 360 Monday to Friday between 2 and 3 p.m. Thanks once again to our guests, Vivek Jacob and David Thorpe, to our board producer, Derek Brandale, to Jennifer Rolnick for helping us behind the scenes with the YouTube stream, and I will talk to you soon.